If you don't have the time to do it, you don't do the crime. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Winging It. I am Sammy. This is my co-host, Frank. Frank, how are you today?
I'm doing pretty well. How are you doing?
I am hanging in there. Yeah, it's kind of the doldrums of summer, so I'm honestly a little bored. And so I'm excited to do this podcast to talk about birds.
Okay, yeah. It's a tough time of year to be chasing rare birds. It's kind of like a lull. You wait for fall migration and then everything gets exciting again.
Yes, I'm really looking forward to. I really like actually early shorebird migration in July. I like to go into the Santa Clara River estuary a lot. So, but that's not what we're here to talk about today. We're here to talk about your own backyard. Well, not your personal backyard, but you, as in the royal you, your backyard feeders. What kind of things you can do to attract birds to your yard in terms of seed and water and things like that. And we do this because birds are starting to fledge and become independent now. So you might see a lot of young birds out trying to figure out how to eat your seed. Frank, you were just telling me, why don't you just share the story you were telling me before we hopped on about the young finches?
Yeah, so we have a little platform feeder. It's just like a hanging mesh tray, and we just pour a bunch of seed in there pretty much every day, every other day. And we have a family of house finches. So there's a bright red male, kind of the gray brown female, and they've been coming by for a while. And they have two young, two little fledglings. And the first couple times they came by, they struggled to land on the shepherd's hook. They struggled to land on the feeder. They're just like, you could see they're clearly just trying to figure out how to be birds, right? And then they
Mm-hmm.
started to land in the feeder and they would just sit there on their butts, flapping their wings with their beaks open. Like, I'm sitting in all this food, but please continue to feed me. And the parents would do it and do it. And eventually they start to figure it out and they're getting a little less clumsy and they start to get the little tufts, the little like great horned owl tufts that the house finches get. And they're able to eat on their own now. So it's fun to watch them come and grow up. But that's kind of a good reason to keep feeding birds through the summer too, just to get to see that entire life cycle play out. I enjoy it.
Yeah, and that might be a good transition to when people put out seed. Not every bird eats seed. So, what kind of birds can people expect, at least here in the Southern California or California region, to show up at their feeders?
So the ones you almost always start with are going to be house finches. Like those are pretty widespread. They're pretty common. They're pretty easy to attract. Anything that has any kind of sunflower seed in it is probably going to bring house finches in. Beyond that, here in California, the California Towhees are very curious. I've got a family that comes around here, and I just love watching them run around the yard and jump up in the feeder and everything. And they will come to millet, sunflower, a whole variety of things. The ones that starts to get a little bit more particular, you can put out things like peanuts, right? Bigger peanuts in the shell. You can put peanuts without the shell, and those are going to be attractive to jays, which some people love and some people hate. I've been doing this long enough to realize that every bird has people that love them and they hate them. Even like hummingbirds and stuff, it's mind blowing. But yeah, so
Really,
peanuts
even
for
with
the
hummingbirds?
jays. People are afraid of hummingbirds. I've met people who are afraid of hummingbirds,
Mm,
just like
I
because
could
they've
see
got
that.
sharp little beaks and they're worried about getting stabbed, even though it's a very flexible beak. I understand it. It's fine. I'm not afraid of hummingbirds, but I can relate. It's okay. Um, so other common birds you can get, it really depends on where you live. So I'm kind of out here in the plain area, so there's not a ton of trees around. So I do hear woodpeckers. I get them on the telephone poles. I don't really get nuthatches or titmice, but if you live in like a more riparian area, if you live up in the oak areas of like Ojai, you're going to get those birds like pretty much instantly sometimes. I set up a feeder for somebody up in Ojai, got out, put the pole in, hung the feeder, put the peanuts in, turned around to go back to my car, and there was already an oak titmouse on the feeder. And I laughed and I took a picture and it's like this is not the expected experience. This is not normal, but I'll take it. So I'd say that's a pretty good start. Goldfinches, they're very nomadic. They're very kind of, I don't want to say seasonal, but they change annually. So we'll get hundreds of lesser goldfinches one year, and next year it'll just be, 10 or 20 or something like that. So they're very variable. I get a lot of mockingbirds, but they don't really bother with the seed that I put out, but they will come for fruit and
Hmm.
jelly. And then this time of year is big for orioles. Hummingbirds are year round. I don't even like think of them as feeder birds anymore because they're so common. But orioles with the jelly, the mealworms, all those kinds of things. There's a lot out there. There's a lot you can put out there. It's just kind of being thoughtful about what do I want, what's in the area, what do I stand a chance of attracting. Like you're not going to get condors coming by, so we have to adjust expectations just a little, just a little bit.
Maybe if you're a cattle rancher with 5,000 acres.
It's true. You could set up your own condor feeding system. I don't know how Fish and Wildlife would feel about that, but maybe you could.
Just like, this cattle is getting too old. All right, condor food.
Yeah, it happens.
We should mention that this is Frank's actual daytime job to run Wild Birds Unlimited in Ventura. So this guy knows what he's talking about when it
It's true.
comes to feeders, seeds, etc., etc.
There is a lot. Yeah, I guess the store's coming up on 9 years this summer. So it's
Wow.
been, it's, I, we always have to say, like, at what point do you become an expert? Do you consider yourself an expert in something? And I am never really comfortable with that, but I know an awful lot about feeding backyard birds and how to do it, like, in a good and healthy way. So as close to an expert as I'm comfortable calling myself, we'll say.
All right. So along that notion, what are some things you see people that come to your store, maybe some common misconceptions or mistakes they make either when setting up their feeders, buying the seed, placing their feeders, or getting a certain type of feeder? What are some things that you see often that you're like, maybe you should try something different?
Okay, there's a lot. there's definitely a lot.
Oh no, I
I
opened
think
Pandora's box.
so. I mean, this is what I do all the time, right? So one of the biggest things I think is that people will say, "Well, I've never seen a squirrel. I don't have squirrels, or I don't. I've never seen rats. I don't have rats. There's no rats. There's no raccoons. There's no opossums." Like, people just assume that they're not around when they are actually pretty much everywhere. Like where I live, I've had raccoons playing on my roof, possums going along the back wall, and you'd be surprised to see. I mean, you've seen where I live. Like, would you expect there to be this amount of wildlife
Right.
running around in the yard out here?
Yeah.
So I do try to set the expectation that when you're getting started, think about where you're putting the feeder, right? So you want to put it where you can see it, obviously, where the birds can see it, and then you want to put it where the critters either can't get to it or have a much harder time getting to it. So hanging it off of a tree branch usually is going to get you a squirrel pretty quickly, a couple weeks or so. Putting it in an open area on a pole, putting a baffle on the pole, nothing can climb up, nothing can jump onto it, and then you don't really have to worry about it. So I prefer to set that expectation early on, and just like if you're going
Mm.
to start this and do it, like do it the right way, do it the way that's going to bring you the most joy. Another thing that people tend to kind of the seed you buy matters. I'm a little
Hmm.
biased, but the birds won't eat just any seed, right? Like Milo, not a lot of birds around here will eat it. Like maybe some wild turkeys if you get those, but otherwise no. Like canary seed, there's just all these like cracked corn, all these things that are in these commercial big box store blends are largely just to fill the bag. That's
Hmm.
it's a money thing, it's a dollar thing, right? It doesn't cost them a lot to fill it. They get it up to the weight and you buy it, and like 25-30% of what you buy will actually be eaten by the birds. So that's why I carry seed that doesn't have any of that. Like it's pointless. It's like I don't want to waste it. It just gets moldy. It grows seeds, weeds, or all kinds of stuff. So all of our stuff is like pure sunflower chips, millet, peanuts, no shells. Like that's the most popular thing that we have. So a lot of people want to do this without having a mess. They don't want the shells everywhere. They don't want plants growing because, condos and small yards, you don't want that kind of stuff. So being thoughtful about that and how to go about doing that in a way that starts you off to succeed, right? If you just go to like a Walmart and get a 10-pound bag of whatever fancy blend that they have there, it the birds may not eat it at all. They might just eat some of it and throw the rest all over your deck, and it's just like it's a hot mess. I've had customers come in who have been like, I really needed seed and you guys were closed and I had to go to, whatever store to buy some. And I don't think the
And it was
birds are ever going to
terrible.
forgive me. They've all disappeared. They won't come back. And it's very, it's touching when they do that. But it does matter. It does matter how you set it up. It matters what you put out there. And then the feeder that you pick is going to matter too. Maybe not as much as the seed, but you want a feeder that's going to stand up to the Santa Ana winds that we get out here. It's going to be, solid enough that if a squirrel does get onto it, the squirrel's not just going to chew through it and destroy it in 5 minutes, which they've
Mm-hmm.
been known to do.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's just a matter of like, okay, if you're committed to it, you want to have birds in your yard. What birds do you want? That'd be the next question I would ask people. Like, do you want hummingbirds? Because that's, there's hummingbird feeders. Do not try to feed them seed, please. Right? A lot of people
Yeah.
don't really know what hummingbirds eat, and so there's a lot of explaining of that. There's certain seed blends for finches, house finches, and goldfinches, and the nuts and the suet and all these kinds of things. So it's really, you have a lot of freedom in what you can do and what you can select and how you can set it up. But there are ways to do it that work best for the birds around here and the yard that you have. And that's kind of the difference in going to a store that does only wild seed, wild bird food versus like, where it's just a department and it's like an end cap in a big store kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah. And as someone who has no financial stake in your store doing well, I can, fully vouch
Thanks.
that the no mess blend is amazing. I first started using it about 2 or 3 years ago. I got it at our Conejo Valley banquet. I got the 1 year of seed from Richard's store. And yeah, I started
Mhm.
using that, and that was a game changer. I mean, I got so many different kinds of birds. I had at one point on my feeder, I had all three species of goldfinch: American, Lawrence's,
Wow.
and lesser. Yeah, just in my little small stinky side yard in Camarillo. And so I think, yeah, when people are looking for seed, you really, like you mentioned, sunflower hearts. So it's basically everything with the shells all removed. So it's just the actual seed itself. Yeah, millet and peanuts, like any sort of combination of those, gonna help you out. You could get black oil sunflower seed, which does have the shells. That is less expensive since it isn't processed as much. But like you mentioned, then you'll get a bunch of shells. They can mold. So again, just kind of depends on how much effort you're willing to put in to keep your place clean, and or if you care.
Right. That's another thing, actually, especially as we are starting to get towards, the hot summer weather. Keeping your feeders clean is something that a lot of people didn't realize they
Mm-hmm.
had to do, which is kind of mind boggling to me. But I guess because it's outside, people just like it rains, it's fine. Um, Wet seed goes bad very quickly. So you don't want your seed to get wet. If
Mm-hmm.
it rains, which I would be great if it did, you want to replace that seed. The
Yep.
raining is not enough to clean and disinfect a feeder. So I wish it was because I don't enjoy doing it. But yeah, you do have to take your feeders down and you do have to scrub them. If usually it's a mild bleach solution, like 1 to 10 parts bleach to water, or if you have feeders that have been treated with antimicrobial coatings, eco clean, you can just use warm water and soap. So much easier to do. If you really don't want to do it, you can just bring them into my store and we do it for a small charge. My staff is very good at cleaning feeders. We take them completely apart, scrub them, and put them back together. It's almost like
Wow,
a
I did not
challenge
know
to
that
see
you
who
did
can do
that.
it faster. Why not? It's important, right? It's if you have cats or dogs, you wash the bowls that you feed them from, right? Probably every time you feed them or every other time or something like that. And the birds are the same way. If a feeder gets really gross, if it starts to get, moldy or something on it, like they can get sick from that, especially hummingbird feeders. You want to empty them out and clean them depending on the temperature every couple of days, 3 or 4 days. There are products that you can add to the nectar that make it stay for about 2 weeks, which is what I do because I can't remember to do it every few days. Every 2 weeks, I can about remember to do that. So there are things you can do to do it better, but you do still have to keep your feeders clean.
Yeah, and especially with some birds like house finches, they are very prone to spreading diseases like avian pox that can't go to humans.
Hmm.
But if you get an outbreak on one house finch, it's gonna spread to a lot of house finches. So if you see finches with like big like warts on around their eyes or their feet or their beaks, that's something you got to watch out for. You got to take your feeders down for a couple weeks until it passes, because since they congregate feeders, they're passing things along between, touching the surface of the feeder. Also, obviously, they poop around the area. So cleaning your feeders is definitely extremely, extremely important. So, yeah, if you don't have the time to do it, you don't do the crime of putting up a dirty bird feeder.
Yeah, yeah. I I know some people with, especially with hummingbird feeders, they'll have two feeders. So they'll have one out
Right.
and then they'll have one in the fridge with like the nectar ready to go so that the hummingbirds don't have to wait too long while they're cleaning the feeder. So if you want, you can take that approach too.
Yes, yes. So, Frank, then another question I have for you, as a novice person, what can I do to bring birds into my yard that don't go to feeders?
Okay. Well, there's a couple of things. I, of course, part of Conejo Audubon, we do a lot with native plants. We do, we sponsor the National Wildlife, Wild Birds Unlimited sponsors National Wildlife Federation's certified habitat program. Like we're the brand sponsor for that. So we always encourage people to plant native plants, which is pretty easy to do these days. You can go to Audubon websites, type in your zip code, it'll give you a list of options. Take that to your local nursery and get some of the plants. The next thing would be having a water source. Fresh water is good. Moving water is pretty good, especially on mosquitoes or anything. Not that that's a big problem here yet. Knock on wood. The other thing would be nest boxes, right? You can put some nest boxes out there, try and get some birds that way. But there are other foods other than seed you can put out, like mealworms. You can get some warblers and suet. Come the suet and mealworms, warblers, flycatchers, all kinds of interesting birds that you would be like, wow, I can't believe that actually came to my yard. That's my sales pitch for suet and bark butter products is it can take a while for the birds to find it and use it, but every once in a while this crazy bird will show up and it'll just like, why, I can't believe that, and that's worth it to me. So there's always got to be some stuff out there like that because those birds, a lot of them just don't care about seeds, so you can appeal to them that way.
Yeah, I just set up my bird bath with a drip system at my parents' place, and like a week and a half ago, I saw a roadrunner right at that same spot because they're right up against an open space. So I really, really hope I see a roadrunner at the bird bath. That would be so cool. But I did. So actually, when I lived over in Moore Park in like the kind of the hills of the Santa Rosa Valley there, and I had a chameleon. I don't know if I've told you this before, but so I kept him outside. His name was Jerry. He hated everything and everybody, but he tolerated me. So I'd feed him
Nice.
crickets, right? And I just dumped him crickets in the cage, and the cage was pretty big, so they would just hang out there. And I had a bunch of plants planted in the cage, so they would just like the crickets just hang out in the dirt. But one day I noticed a roadrunner kind of poking around the cage, and I was like, "What is he doing?" And I saw him
Oh
pecking
no.
at the back, and I was like, "Oh my gosh!" And I looked, and he had pecked a hole clean through where all the crickets were hanging out, like in the back corner of the cage. I'm like, "He's been coming here and eating my crickets."
Wow, lucky you didn't get Jerry.
Yeah, but for real though, I was like, "Oh my gosh, it could have taken my chameleon potentially."
Wow, clever.
To plug the native plants not only provide food for insects, but those insects in turn are food for birds. The native plants, some of them when they fruit, those are food for birds. And then also they just provide shelter. Everything that an animal needs. I mean, just think about you and I, right? We need food, water, shelter, and love. So I don't know if you can provide the birds with love, but you can love them by providing them the other things.
Sure, we can. I mean, there's a lot that starts to happen when you feed birds and when you observe birds, right? There's a lot of mental benefits to it. It's very relaxing, and people really form bonds to the birds that come to their yards, right? It's like, oh, my birds and my birds. Like I hear that in my store a lot. It's very
Yeah.
sweet. And I hear all the stories about the hummingbird. It's like, oh, the hummingbird was letting me know the feeder was empty, was buzzing in front of my face. And like, it's,
Yeah, yeah,
I
they
believe
do
it.
that.
Like
Yeah,
I've done
they're
these things. Like, yeah. Yeah, we have, the crows will come by and like wait for you to put the peanuts out, or the jay will come and just like sit on the armrest of the chair. And like, they get used to you over time. They're like, okay, this is the person who gives me food, right? So we actually have some crows that follow us around a park and they recognize the dog. I think it's probably the dog. And they come over and land, like they swoop right in front and land nearby, and you throw them like a dog treat or something and throw them some peanuts. So it's you can have a connection with these wild creatures. And I think that's really why we do it, right? That's why we're
yeah.
feeding the birds in the first place. They're the beauty, the song, the mental benefits, which I think we're always aware of, but now just starting to call out and realize to it.
One topic I don't know if you want to discuss, but I think it might be worth mentioning is I have heard some people express concern of the birds becoming like quote unquote dependent on humans for food. So what would you say kind of to that?
I do a lot of presentations, right? I mean, not as much anymore. I do about one a month, but I have several that I do about migration, and I talk about bird myths, like bird feeding myths. And so don't feed the birds because they'll become dependent on it. That's one. And that is just objectively not true. Like they're still wild animals. The food we put out for them is supplemental food. And even though it looks like they're here all day, right? It looks like they're just stuffing their little faces all day. It only accounts for about 20% of their diet. So Cornell's done a lot
Mm.
of work into to studying these things. So I I tell this to my customers, like I would not be in this business if I thought it was actually detrimental to the bird's health and well-being. And I feel like with the habitat loss, even just in this area, all the like condos, apartments, and stuff going up, like it's insane. And the birds lose a lot of habitat. They lose a lot of food sources. They lose a lot of water sources. And I feel like recreating some amount of that in your yard helps at least a little bit. It's kind of the best we can do, short of taking action to vote on certain legislation that comes up and preserving green spaces and stuff like that, which we also do. But I really feel like having these food options out there helps the bird populations. Some of the ones that get accustomed to feeders more, like bluebirds come to feeders more often than they used to decades ago, and their populations are starting to trend up. So it's helpful for them. They're usually healthier overall. So I don't think I know you asked about whether it'll become dependent. They don't. I will say there's one caveat, and that's the Anna's hummingbirds in the Pacific Northwest. In the
I was going to
winter,
mention that.
for
Yeah.
whatever reason, they start migrating up the west coast, and it's like I think they're following all the eucalyptus trees that have been planted up there, something like that. And so if you have winter and you have a hummingbird that's coming to your feeder and it's like snowing out, then that bird is probably depending on your feeder for that season. So you have to have a heated hummingbird feeder out there. You have to keep it full. That's really the only time that I can think of where a bird would actually become dependent on the food that you're putting out there. Otherwise, they're still foraging. They're still going to do their other thing. It kind of ties in. The other myth that goes with that is feeding birds will stop them from migrating, which I love that one. I will lean into that every year and be like, go ahead, every spring, put out as much food as you want and come like the last week of May, first week of June, if anybody has any white crowned sparrows left, like I want to hear about it, right? Like I would love for them to stick around all year. It's just you can't override, all of the factors that are driving them to go and migrate and reproduce. The food is not what's keeping them in your yard. So
Yeah, no, I think it's important to understand, like you mentioned, I think that sometimes we can have a perspective where we think we have the human world here and then we have the wild world over here, and there's like limited interaction. But like you mentioned, we have, we've built into different open spaces, and we're much a part of the animals don't see a difference between the wild world and the urban world. So taking advantage, well, not taking advantage, but using your yard as a space for wildlife is going to be nothing but beneficial to them. I mean, so like our actions do have consequences, but they can be beneficial. Like Cooper's hawks are doing really well in cities because there's lots of feeders around and there's lots of food sources for small songbirds that they hunt. And so you see Cooper's hawks now really thriving in urban areas. So again, not to promote like vast urbanization everywhere, but just saying that if you move or whatever, the birds can also, like, they can fly, they can move, they can adapt. If that food source is no longer there, that's how they forage. They go to an area when the plant stops reproducing or seeds or whatever, then they move on. And so, plants die all the time. And so if you move on or you don't feed for whatever reason, they would just treat it the same way as anything else, where a food source is no longer reliable. And so they move on, try to find another one.
That's true. They will miss you though. They remember. They
They
will
will
miss
miss you. Yes. Yes.
you. Yeah.
Yes.
The hummingbirds.
Yeah.
So hummingbirds will visit, thousands of flowers, right? And they know when they produce nectar and they know when they're flowering and they come around and they check them all repeatedly. That holds true with your feeders as well. So if you keep your feeders full, it gets added to the map and they come around and they check it. If you take the feeder down, you'll see the hummingbird come and check the area that it was in and hover around and like, I thought there was a feeder here. And they'll do that sometimes for years after the feeder's down. So they do remember, and they will miss you. That's it.
Yeah. I mean, just what they're. I mean, you know what? Hummingbird doesn't even weigh an ounce. Its brain is, imperceptibly small for us, and even then, and it's just incredible. But anything else you want to add, Frank, before we sign off for now?
I would just to throw a shout out to all the Wild Birds Unlimited stores out there. If you're not local to me or the stores around this area, go visit one. Talk to somebody. They all know a lot about feeding birds and they can tell you how to get started, what feeders, what food, what's going on right now. That is the place to go to learn about birds in your neighborhood.
Awesome. Love it. Yeah. And they also do ship if you're not terribly close, but within an area, they will ship depending on how far you are exactly. So, all right. Well, I think that's all we have for today, everybody. If you have any questions or comments that we didn't address, feel free to put them in the comment section below and maybe we'll get to them. Again, you can follow us at Frank the Bird Guy on Patreon. You can follow me at birdingwithsammy.com. We also have our Facebook page for Winging It with Frank and Sammy. So I hope you guys enjoyed this one. Until next time, feed those birds, and we'll see you in a bit.